Hello, it's Tracy Dix here again from Wyrd Learning, and today I'm on day 36 of my conversion card challenge featuring James Wedmore's powerful language patterns that convert. So I think we're on a bit of a sensory series these few days because the last one was about being visual. Today I've got let them hear you. People think with pictures, sounds, and feelings, which is why it's important to include all three in your copy. When you reread your own copy, you may even hear that you resonate with one of these modalities of the others. But your preferred modality may not click with your reader, so it's best to adapt your language to include everyone. Use this card to review your copy and adjust your language to include more auditory terms. Fun fact, if you have a podcast, chances are you have some auditory learners in your audience. Auditory cues and words. It sounds like ... I can hear blank. Is this resonating or clicking? Listen for ... Ring a bell? Example in action. So listen, if I asked you to tell me exactly where your business is at in just a few sentences, could you do it? So I'd like to apply this, first of all, to presentations. So if you're being assessed on a presentation, it's really good to have various checkpoints just to make sure the audience is following your presentation and is clear on something that you're saying before you kind of move on to the next thing, especially if you're kind of building on what has come before. It's also a really good technique in teaching, if you are training to become a teacher, or if you are a postgraduate who's starting to perhaps conduct a few tutorials and seminars, it's really good to check in with your listener, your audience, every so often, just to make sure they're still with you. When it comes to academic writing, of course, you wouldn't use something like "so listen," because it's not about that kind of one-to-one relationship. But these language patterns might apply to perhaps if you're conducting a research project, and part of that might be about, finding out how much creatures or people respond to certain sounds. You might want to be a little descriptive of what it sounds like. What can they hear, just so that whoever's looking at your article later on has a fuller sense of how exactly you conducted that research study. The other thing I want to say when it comes to description is that it can be a bit of a fine art to decide how much or how little description to include in your work. And I would say for the most part, it is about including as much detail as is needed for your reader to gain a full understanding of what has been relevant to the study, what is linked to the outcome of the study, rather than going into too much description. So one very common mistake that students make when it comes to academic writing when they're starting off pertains to their introduction. So it's pretty common for students to give a lot of background information on the topic which isn't directly relevant, but they think, well, this kind of foregrounds it, so I'm going to give, paragraphs and paragraphs. And that isn't really necessary. I think I've said this before, but the difference between an introduction and introductory material is basically that an introduction should introduce your argument. So what is the research you've done? What articles have you most engaged with that are pertinent to your study? How are you planning to apply them to your topic? What areas of the topic would you like to focus on? How are you going to kind of classify or structure everything in your assignment? Which paragraph is going to discuss what? So those are the kinds of things you would include in an introduction, rather than I'm going to give you all this background into the history of alcoholism, for example, before you talk about how alcoholism affects certain sectors of society or certain social groups. If your research is about the present, so what alcoholism looks like in 2023, you don't need to go into the history of alcoholism because that's just too much detail. Okay, so I hope that helps to make things a little bit clearer if you've been struggling with certain parts of academic writing and knowing like how much is too much to include. And yeah, so join me again for day 37 tomorrow. Bye.